Guys, welcome back to an episode of the Book Club in the World Book Club. Yeah, and today guys, an extremely special episode because today guys, episode number 363, 65. It's full of years. Yeah, it's 1 year. 1 year. If I'm going to release one episode per day, 330, 365 episode, 356. Anyway, guys, that's just like that number. Anyway, guys. Today we are continuing with Influence, Psychology of Persuasion by Robert B. Kennedy, page 173 to 175 on the PDF and the ebook, and actually 163 on the book. Let's go. Whenever we are faced with a so potent motivator of human action, it's natural to expect that the good reasons exist for the motivation. In the case of obedience to authority, even a brief consideration of human social organization offers justification aplenty. A multi-layered and widely accepted system of authority confers an immense advantage upon a society. It allows the development of sophisticated structures for research production, trade, defense, expansion, and the social control that would otherwise be impossible. The other alternative, anarchy, is a state that is hardly known for its beneficial effects on cultural groups, and one that the social philosopher Thomas Hobbes assures us would render life solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Consequently, we are trained from birth that obedience to proper authority is right and disobedience is wrong. The essential message feeds parental lessons. The scholars rhymes, stories and songs of our childhood and is carried forward in the legal, military, and political systems we encounter as adults. Notions of submission and loyalty to legitimate rule are accorded much value in each. Religious instruction contributes as well. The very first book of the Bible, for example, describes how failure to obey the ultimate authority produces the loss of paradise for Adam, Eve, and the rest of the human race. Shows that a particular metaphor proved to subtle. Just a bit further into the Old Testament, we can read in what might be the closest biblical representation of the milgram experiment, the respectful account of Abraham's willingness to plunge a dagger through the heart of his young son, because God, without any explanation, ordered it. This story, the correctness of an action was not adjusted, but was not adjudged by such considerations as apparent senselessness, harmfulness, injustice, or usual moral standards, but was a mere command of a higher authority. Abraham's torment order was a test of obedience, and he, like Milgram's subjects, would perhaps learn an early lessons from him past. Stories like this of Abraham and Milgram's subjects can tell us much about the power of and value for obedience in our culture. In another sense, however, they might be misleading as to the way obedience typically occurs. We rarely agonize to such a degree over the pros and cons of authority demands. In fact, our obedience frequently takes place in a click-bear fashion, with little or no conscious deliberation. information from a recognized authority and provide us a valuable shortcut for deciding how to act in a situation. After all, as Milgram himself suggests, confronting the dictates of authority figures as always had genuine practical advantages for us. Early on, those people, for example, parents, teachers, knew more than we did, and we found that taking their advice proved beneficial, partly because of their greater wisdom, and partly because they controlled our rewards and punishments. As adults, the same benefits persist for the same reasons. For the authority figures now appear as employers, though the authority figures now appear as employers, judges, and government leaders. Because their positions speak of superior access to information and power, it makes great sense to comply with the wishes of properly constituted authorities. It makes so much sense, in fact, that we often do so when it makes no sense at all. This paradox is, of course, the same one that attends all major weapons of influence. In this instance, once we realize that obedience to authority is mostly rewarding, it is easy to allow ourselves to the convenience of automatic obedience. The simultaneous blessing and bane of such blind obedience is its mechanical character. We don't have to think, therefore we don't. Although such mindless obedience leads us to appropriate action in the great majority of cases, there will be conspicuous exceptions, because we are reacting rather than thinking. Let's take an example from one phase of our lives where authority pressures are visible and strong. Medicine. Health is enormously important to us. Thus, physicians who possess large amounts of knowledge and influence in this vital area hold the position of respected authorities. In addition, the medical establishment has a clear trust, power, and prestige structure. The various kinds of health workers well understand the level of their jobs in this structure, and they well understand too that the MD sits at the top. No one might overrule the doctor's judgment in a case, except perhaps another doctor of higher rank. As a consequence, a long-established tradition of automatic obedience to a doctor's orders has developed among healthcare staff. The worrisome possibility arises then that when a physician makes a clear error, no one lawyer in the hierarchy will think to question it, precisely because once a legitimate authority is given an order, subordinates stop thinking in the situation and start reacting. Make this kind of quick view response into a complex hospital environment, and mistakes are certain. Indeed, a study done in the early 1980s by the US Healthcare Financing Administration showed that for patient medication alone, the average hospital had a 12% daily error rate. A decade later, things had not improved. According to a Harvard University study, 10% of all cardiac arrests in hospitals are attributable to medication errors. Errors in the medicine patients receive can occur for a variety of reasons. However, a book entitled medication errors, causes, and prevention by two Temple University pharmacology professors Michael Cohen and Neil Davis attributes much of the problem to the mindless deference given the boss and the patient in the patient's case. The attending physician. According to Professor Cohen, in case after case, patients, nurses, pharmacists, and other physicians do not question the prescription. Take, for example, the strange case of the rectal hemorrhage reported by Cohen and Davis. A physician ordered ear drops to be administered to the right ear of a patient suffering pain and infection there. But instead of writing out completely the location right ear on the prescription, the doctor abbreviated it so that the instructions read place in our ear. Upon receiving the prescription, the duty nurse promptly puts the required number of ear drops into the patient's anus. Obviously, market treatment of an hemorrhage made no sense. Yet neither the patient nor the nurse questioned it. The important lesson of this story is that in many situations where legitimate authority is spoken, what would otherwise make sense is irrelevant. In those instances, we don't consider the situation as a whole, but attend and respond to only one aspect of it. Whenever our behaviors are governed in such an unthinking manner, we can be confident that there will be compliance professionals trying to take advantage. We can stay within the field of medicine, and we can stay within the field of medicine. It is that advertisers frequently harness the respect accorded to doctors in our culture by hiring actors to play the roles of doctors speaking on behalf of the product. My favorite example is a TV commercial featuring actor Robert Young, consoling people against the dangers of caffeine and recommending caffeine-free Sanka brand coffee. The commercial was highly successful, selling so much coffee that it was played for years in several versions. But why should this commercial prove so effective? Why on earth would we take Robert Young's word for the health consequences of the caffeinated coffee? Because, as the advertising agency that hired him knew perfectly well, he is associated in the minds of the American public with Marcus Welby, MD, the role he played in a nearly long-running television series. Objectively, it doesn't make sense to be swayed by the comments of a man Objectively, it doesn't make sense to be swayed by the comments of a man we know to be just an actor who used to play a doctor. But as a practical matter, is that man moved the Sanka. And guys, guess what? This is the end of the episode. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me. I really expect to choose to invest your time with me, and now enjoy the previous part of time. And again, see you all to next week on Sunday for the next episode of the Greatest Book in the World, the Book Club. Until then, take care of yourself, have a great time, and bye-bye.